You live in the best place ever. Last Friday, after I had completed most of the work on this teaching, I headed to Seymour Library in Auburn to return some books. And as I was heading there, I passed through downtown Auburn, and everything looked so picturesque, I had to stop the car and take some pictures. It just looked beautiful. The storefronts are all well decorated and well maintained. In front of them, there are these sort of 19th century looking lampposts, and on those were hanging baskets of flowers and American flags, and everything just looked so nice. And I thought, this looks like what the ideal picture of small town America is. And I thought it was very befitting what I was going to be teaching, because I am teaching on You Live in the Best Place Ever. That's true whether you live in Auburn, or Skaneateles, or Syracuse, or Cleveland, or New York City, or even Detroit. Now, I know some of you may be thinking, I understood Auburn and Skaneateles and certainly Cleveland, but you lost me when you got to Detroit. But the point is, it doesn't matter what physical place you live in the best place ever, because none of those places is where you really live if you're a believer. You live according to God's Word. You are citizens of heaven. And that's our home. This is a place where, like the song says, we're just a-passing through. We have a much greater place to look forward to, a much greater place that's really our home and where our heart is. And we're here in this world, but this world is not our home. We're here as ambassadors for the Lord Jesus Christ. We're here to live life, to live that more than abundant life that Jesus Christ made available, and to let other folks know how great it is. That's a great key to enjoying life, to recognize that wherever you are physically, that's not where you really live, that you're seated in the heavenlies. But another great key, and in some ways on a practical level, maybe even more important to recognize, is that where you live physically is not what's important. It's not where you live physically, but where you live mentally that really counts. Some people live in the land of gloom and doom under a dark cloud. And they dress themselves in sackcloth and ashes, and they eat the bread of sorrow and drink the wine of bitterness. And they are stooped over by the burdens of life, dragging themselves through endless days of dreariness. That's where some people choose to live mentally. Others choose to live in the land of bright skies and daisies, where they feast on milk and honey, drinking in the nectar of God's goodness and abundance. And they walk through life with a song in their heart, a spring in their step, and dancing shoes on their feet. You choose where you're going to live mentally. You may live where you live physically because that's just where you grew up. Maybe you picked it. Maybe you didn't. Some people are happy with where they live. Most people, seems like physically, they don't really like where they live unless they're Texans, and then everybody likes. Never understood that once I saw Texas. But it's not what's important. It's not what's important. You choose where you live, which place, which of those lands. And if you're not enjoying where you live, then move. And again, I'm not speaking about where you live physically, because you know what? Wherever you are, there you are. You carry the same mental baggage with you wherever you go. It's not about where we live, and it's not about the circumstances of our lives. That's not what makes for a happy place to live. It's where we choose to live in our thought life. There's a great little saying, or little, I don't know what you call it, we'll just call it a saying that I once heard. Two men look through prison bars, one sees mud, the other stars. They're both in prison, you know. They didn't choose to be there, unless you want to really say, well, their actions, they chose their actions, but, you know, I don't think either one would like to stay there. But one sees only the mud, the other one sees the stars. It's a matter of what you focus on. What do you choose to focus on? What do you turn your attention to? That attitude that you have is more important than anything else when it comes to the circumstances of your life. And again, you decide, and if you don't like where you live mentally, then don't just stay there. You can take your Bibles and go to 2 Kings chapter 6. We're going to find some guys that found themselves in a place they didn't like. And you want to ever talk about somebody being stuck between a rock and a hard place, the four fellows that we're going to look at tonight, really, they were in the worst situation. We'll pick up the record in chapter 6 and verse 24. And it came to pass after this that Benhadad, king of Syria, gathered all his hosts and went up and besieged Samaria. So Benhadad, the king of Syria, these are the bad guys. Okay? These are the bad guys. And Samaria, now at this point in the history of the nation of Israel, this is the headquarters for Israel. By this point, the kingdom of Israel has been divided. It's been divided into the kingdom of Israel with 10 tribes and the kingdom of Judah with 2 tribes. Israel finds themselves often, or for the most part, kind of in trouble because they have no longer worshiped the true God, and that's the situation here. They aren't worshiping the true God. They've turned their backs on God. They don't trust God or believe God. And because of that, they find themselves in a situation like this, where this other country, Syria, has laid siege. They're out there, they've got the whole city surrounded, and they're just kind of waiting for them to get weaker before they move in to wipe them out. That's the whole strategy of besieging a city. You just cut them off from everything, and you take your good old time about moving in and wiping them out. Verse 25. And there was a great famine in Samaria. So it would be bad enough to have an army just outside the city waiting to jump in and kill you. But on top of that, there's a famine. People are starving. There's no food. And behold, they besieged it until an ass's head was sold for 80 pieces of silver, and a 1/4 part of a cab of dove's dung for 5 pieces of silver. Now, that just sounds like the craziest thing that you'd ever want to eat, right? Well, it's not what it sounds like. You have to understand the Eastern idiom behind that verse, and I'm going to read you just a little short excerpt from this book, Eastern Customs and Idioms of the Bible, by Bishop K.C. Pillai. Ass's head is a kind of root which grows in the hedges. This is not an ass's head at all, no more so than a hot dog is a dog. This is eaten during the famine time. When there is no famine, it's eaten by the pigs. The famine was so acute in Samaria that they sold asses' heads for so much, and so was dove's dung. Dove's dung is really a type of pea or bean which they feed the doves. So it wasn't that they were so bad that they were eating these disgusting things, but what they were eating was still something that normally they'd never eat, and certainly they would not pay these kind of inflated prices. Well, I wouldn't pay that much for an ass's head, would you? Verse 26. And as the king of Israel was passing by upon the wall, so he's the king of Israel, this is God's people, but again, they're no longer walking with God. There cried a woman unto him, saying, Help, my lord, O king. And he said, If the Lord do not help thee, when shall I help thee? Out of the barn floor or out of the winepress? Saying, what do you want me to do for you? You know, God's not helping us. God's not sending rain. What can I do? You think I've got food in the barn floor or the wine press to give you? And this woman, she answered, continuing in verse 28, the woman said to, oh no, I'm jumping ahead. And the king said unto her, What aileth thee? And she answered, This woman said unto me, Give thy son, that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow. So we boiled my son and did eat him. And I said unto her on the next day, Give thy son, that we may eat him. And she hid her son. Boy, I can't imagine anybody being that desperate, can you?
No.
You know, but that was the situation. That was the situation. It was so desperate that some strange people were going to such desperate and ridiculously extreme measures. And here this woman was crying because she made a deal where they ate the one lady's son and now they wanted to eat hers. And it came to pass, verse 30, when the king heard the words of the woman, that he rent his clothes. It's really his mantle, and it's not rent like, you know, he went to some tuxedo place and got a suit. Rent means he tore it, and that was a sign of just absolute despair, anger, frustration, a sign of just how bad the situation was and how fed up he was with it. And he passed by upon the wall, and the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth within upon his flesh. You wore sackcloth when you were real sad. Then he said, verse 31, God do so and more also to me, if the head of Elisha the son of Shaphat shall stand on him this day. Elijah was the prophet, the man of God. And he's blaming the man of God for this situation because the man of God, the prophet, has told him that if they don't come back to God, bad things are going to happen. So rather than take the advice, rather than heed that warning and acting on it, he doesn't. But then when these terrible things happen, he blames Elisha like Elisha did this to us. And he says, this is terrible what's happening. People are starving. I'm going to go kill him. I'm going to have his head before this day is done. So he sends some men to go to get Elijah. We'll pick it up in 2 Kings chapter 7, verse 1. Skipping down. Then Elisha said, he's saying to those that come from the king to get him, Hear ye the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, Tomorrow about this time, a measure of fine flour will be sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel in the gate of Samaria. He's saying, I'm going to tell you something. As bad as everything is, God is going to turn this around. By this time tomorrow, a whole measure of barley, flour, these things are going to be there for pennies. Going to be sold in the marketplace for pennies. Then a Lord, verse 2, on whose hand the king leaned, answered the man of God and said, Behold, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, might this thing be? He just ridiculed him. He didn't believe him. He just scorned what he was saying. You know, the way that so many people do when you tell them about what God can do, when you tell them about the power of God. And their attitude, whether they say it aloud or not, some will have the nerve to say is, what, are you kidding me? You think God's just going to have money? You have a great need. You need a bunch of money by tomorrow, and you're telling me you're going to pray and God's going to meet that need. What do you think, that money's just going to fall down from heaven? What do you think, that somehow somebody's just going to show up and give you all this? I've had people say that to me many times. And many times they've been proved wrong. This fellow will be proved wrong. Verse 3. Oh, didn't finish 2. The important part. And he said, and he, the man of God, said, Behold, thou shalt see it with thine eyes, but shall not eat thereof. I'm telling you, it's going to happen, and you're going to see it happen, but you're not going to enjoy any of it. You're not going to get one hot dog. Verse 3. And there were 4 leprous men at the entering in of the gate. And they said one to another, Why sit we here until we die? Here are these 4 leprous men that sat at the gate. And they couldn't go in, no matter what the circumstances. A leper could not go inside the city anyway. Well, they'd have to make a lot of noise and so on to go in. These fellas were even worse off because they were lepers. And there they are in this terrible situation, but they are tired of just being stuck between a rock and a hard place. And they say, Why sit we here until we die? Verse 4, If we say we will enter into the city, then the famine is in the city, and we shall die there. And if we sit still here, we die also. Whether we go in the city or stay out here, one way or the other, if we just sit here, we're going to die. Now therefore come, and let us fall unto the host of the Syrians. Let's just go to the enemy. Let's just wander into their camp and see what happens. If they save us alive, we shall live, and if they kill us, we shall but die. Might as well get it over with fast than just slowly starve to death. These 4 guys have some logic anyway, right?
Yes.
Verse 5. And they rose up in the twilight to go unto the camp of the Syrians. And when they were come to the uttermost part of the camp of Syria, behold, there was no man there. They get to the camp of the enemy. And you just picture it. I mean, it's the camp of the enemy. You know, they got their tents all up. They've got their whole stockade of weapons and everything there. But nobody's to be found. Why? Verse 6 tells us. For the Lord had made the host of the Syrians to hear a noise of chariots and a noise of horses, even the noise of a great host, a great army. And they said one to another, Lo, the king of Israel hath hired against us the king of the Hittites and the king of the Egyptians to come upon us. So nobody's come on them. That didn't happen. Israel didn't make an alliance with other armies. They didn't have an army coming after them, but God made it so it sounded like it. They heard the sound of thundering horses and chariots and this whole thing, and they freak out. They totally freak out. Verse 7. Wherefore they arose and fled in the twilight, and left their tents, and their horses, and their asses, even the camp as it was, and fled for their life. They are so panicked, they don't even stop and think, you know, I could get away from this faster if I got on one of those horses. They just run. They just run, and they leave everything behind. Verse 8. And then these lepers came to the uttermost part of the camp. They went into one tent, and did eat and drink, and carried thence silver and gold and raiment, and went and hid it, and came again, and entered into another tent, and carried thence also, and went and hid it. They're just having a grand old time. They're just going from one tent to another. Oh, look what I got. Oh, you know, would you like this turkey leg to chew on while we start loading up all the gold and silver and everything else? Verse 9. Then they said one to another, we do not well. You know, okay, this is fun, but we shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't just be enjoying all this ourselves. This is a day of good tidings. We've got some good news, and we hold our peace. We're not telling anybody else. That's not right. If we tarry till the morning light, some mischief will come upon us. You know, if we just keep doing what we're doing, who knows? Maybe they'll come back, and then we're going to be in trouble one way or the other. Now therefore come, that we may go and tell the king's household. So they came and called unto the porter of the city, and they told them, and they tell them everything that happened. They told them just what occurred and what they found, and that there's all of this food and riches and everything that they could ever desire right there for the picking. Verse 12. And the king arose in the night and said unto his servants, Oh no, you can't fool me. I will now show you what the Syrians have done unto us. They know that we be hungry. Wherefore, they've gone out of the camp to hide themselves in the field, saying, when they come out of the city, we shall catch them alive and get into the city. He thinks this is just a trap. It's just a trap. I'm too smart to fall into that trap. I know what happens. We go out there. Everybody's hiding out in the hills. As soon as we walk into the camp, they're going to come swooping down on us and wipe us all out. He just refused to believe that anything could get better. And even though the man of God had told his Lord, the one that worked under him, his emissary, that this was going to happen, he still won't believe it. He won't believe that anything good could happen, that somehow God could turn things around. So, in verse 13, one of his servants answered and said, we won't read all of it, but he basically says, you know what, just go look. Okay? Just send some people and check it out. You don't have to send the whole army in there. Just scope it out. And so they do. Verse 16. And the people went out and spoiled the tents of the Syrians. You know, spoiled means that they took all the goods. Didn't mean they ruined the tents, threw eggs at them or something. They took everything good that was there, got it all from them. So a measure of fine flour was sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel, according to the word of the Lord. Exactly what the man of God had told that fellow would happen. That there was so much in one day's time, in less than 24 hours, everything turned around. When before they were paying a week's wages to get a little pea that they'd only feed a bird, or some root that was only fit to whatever, feed the pigs. Now, good loaf of bread, plenty of flour, barley, you can get for just pennies. Verse 17. And the king appointed the Lord on whose hand he leaned. This is the fellow that laughed at the man of God. This is the same fellow that said, you're crazy, you're out of your mind. And the man of God told him, yeah, well, you're going to see it, but you're not going to enjoy it. This guy, the king, is given, he appointed him to have the charge of the gate. You're the gatekeeper, okay? We got to impose some order here. Everybody's going to be running out here. So you stand at the gate and you just maintain order. And the people trode upon him in the gate. He's right. The king was right. They stampeded out. Everybody, you know, it's like, I don't know, what was it? What was
Black Friday.
Huh? Black Friday. That one communicates to everybody. I was going to name some department store, but yeah, Black Friday, the old Black Friday. You know, that's what it's like, except worse. And he gets just trampled. He gets trampled and he dies. Just like he was told. As the man of God had said, who spake when the king came down. You know, everything for those lepers did turn around in a day. They are smart enough to say, why sit we here until we die? And had they not gotten up and moved, well then, no matter what God had done, nobody would have known about it, would they? That king wasn't, even when he was told that everybody was gone, he wasn't going into that camp. Nobody would have found out. But here are these 4 lepers that just decide, I'm not going to just sit here until I die. I'm going to change things. We're going to change things. And boy, that's the motto, that's the mantra that many people ought to adopt. Some already have. Why sit we here until we die? When you find yourself in that place where you feel like you're in that between a rock and a hard place, when you feel like either way you go, it seems like the wrong way, here's the lesson: God will make a way where there is no way. God will always make a way where there is no way. He'll provide. He'll give you the answer. He'll give you whatever you need, the wisdom, the direction, the abundance. He is a God who is there to care for his children, because that's who he is. He is our loving Father. He is our loving Father who only wants to take care of us. That's what Christianity is. It's the way of a father with his family. Our loving Heavenly Father wants us to know him, to walk with him, to enjoy his care, to have the fellowship with him. You are what he desired from before the ages. As he put this all together, he dreamed of a family he could love and care for, and he will continue to watch over us. He has seated us in the heavenlies with him, and choose to live in that place in your mind as well. God bless.